West Berlin, 1981. The environment was compressed and utterly dark, save for the single harsh light of a film projector. CIA analyst Tom Weaver sat hunched in a surveillance van, a temporary safe house tucked anonymously behind a row of shuttered shops near the border. Weaver loaded a freshly developed strip of 35mm surveillance film into the machine. The film strip, captured by a high-powered lens mounted hundreds of meters away, represented a single precious timeline of Soviet movement. The reel advanced, frame by frame, until the analyst found what he was looking for. Frame 44. He froze the image. The photograph showed a Soviet man in his mid-40s, later identified as Viktor Mikhailov, walking quickly toward a diplomatic sedan parked haphazardly on the curb. Mikhailov was suspected to be a high-value GRU courier, a man tasked with moving the most sensitive intelligence packets across the east-west line. The image was grainy, high contrast, and cold. But something in Mikhailov's left hand caught the projector's intense light. It was a small, smooth wooden object. It appeared round, and its painted surface reflected a startling splash of vivid red. Weaver leaned into the lens, adjusting the focus and zooming in on the pixelated negative. The object was unmistakable. It was a Matryoshka-style wooden nesting doll toy designed specifically for young children. The room stilled. The contradiction was immediate and absolute. A trained courier, a man who should have been carrying only sealed official documents, was walking into a suspected dead drop exchange, holding a child's comfort toy. The logical pattern was interrupted. A simple professional question hung heavy in the air. Why would a trained courier bring a child's toy to a dead drop exchange? The analysts would soon realize that this tiny, insignificant object, a child's forgotten toy, was the single most crucial piece of evidence. Within days, the toy would expose Mikhailov, collapse a vital GRU supply line, and trigger the arrest of an entire family who never knew the secret they were living beside. To understand the catastrophic significance of that single toy, one must first grasp the rigorous operational requirements of the GRU courier network. The GRU, Soviet military intelligence, relied on couriers like Viktor Mikhailov to move the most sensitive physical materials, rolls of microfilm, operational codebooks, hard cash, and diplomatic packets containing forged travel documents. The courier's greatest asset was not speed or evasion, but predictability disguised as routine life. They were selected because their official cover was impeccable. Mikhailov worked at a Soviet trade mission in West Berlin, an assignment that required frequent, non-suspicious travel between East and West. He was a perfect asset, a man who looked exactly like the mundane, grey bureaucrat he claimed to be. Surveillance teams often spent months trying to catch a single break in the routine, a deviation, a moment of sloppiness, a flaw in the pattern. The job demanded absolute discipline, a conscious effort to erase all personal life from the professional sphere. Any personal item carried in the street, any gesture not covered by the official role, was a potential leak. Mikhailov was a master of this separation. He returned every evening to his small government-allotted apartment, where he was simply a husband and the father of a young daughter, Katya. Katya was 7 years old, a child of the Soviet system who knew her father as a quiet man who brought home small carved wooden toys from his foreign trips. Mikhailov balanced the grinding requirement of clandestine GRU duties with the simple, essential demands of fatherhood. He believed he had achieved a perfect, unbreakable compartmentalization, that he could perform high-stakes espionage and return home without carrying any trace of that danger into his domestic life. The entire structure of his cover rested on the premise that his two lives never touched. The moment he stepped out the door for a mission, he ceased to be a father and became a silent extension of the state. He maintained this double life for years, secure in the belief that the cold discipline of the GRU shielded his family from the operational pressure. He was meticulously trained. He was professionally flawless. But he was fundamentally, tragically wrong. He had no way of knowing that the tiny traces of the life he loved were the very elements that, when caught in the precise geometry of a high-powered lens, would be his operational undoing. The enemy didn't need to follow the courier. They only needed to see the small reflection of home he carried with him. The CIA and the West German Federal Intelligence Service, BND, had been tracking a complex potential courier route intersecting near the Rathaus-Steglitz district. This area was chosen by the Soviets for its blend of heavy foot traffic and accessible diplomatic parking, offering both cover and an easy escape route. To catch a momentary handoff, the agencies implemented a surveillance car wash, a highly coordinated rotation of 3 teams, ensuring that one lens was always focused on the target area, with no gaps in coverage. On the day of the exposure, the operation nearly failed. A West German surveillance officer, maintaining a close, discreet tail, was momentarily compromised when a city bus unexpectedly blocked his line of sight, creating a critical 2-second visual blackout. The GRU had developed a keen sense for this kind of momentary distraction. When the line of sight cleared, Mikhailov was already approaching the curb. A CIA photographer, positioned hundreds of meters away in the mobile van, had only a 4-second window to capture the target as he moved into range of the sedan. He instinctively snapped 3 frames in quick succession. The timing was crucial. The frames had to capture the target before the exchange, while his posture was uncompromised. Mikhailov passed the photographer's geometric target zone. The click of the shutter, nearly inaudible, sealed the image. The film was immediately extracted. It was not developed on site but rushed through a specialized mobile darkroom in a high-speed vehicle, a process designed to deliver fresh negatives to the safehouse analysts within minutes. The photographer, focused solely on the required composition, Mikhailov's face, suit, and approach geometry, registered nothing unusual in the moment of exposure. He had captured the movement he was tasked to document, a routine success. He had no way of knowing that within those 3 frames, his lens had inadvertently captured an operational vulnerability in the form of a small, red painted piece of wood, an object that should not, under any professional circumstance, have existed in that brief 4-second window. Back in the dim surveillance safehouse, analyst Weaver fed the high-resolution negative into the enlarger. The image of Viktor Mikhailov snapped into sharp focus, revealing the mundane details of his Soviet-issue overcoat and the stiff professional set of his jaw. Then the image revealed the anomaly. The small, round object held in his hand was unmistakable, a Matryoshka-style wooden doll. Its precise coloration, the specific application of the red and yellow pigments, identified it as an item crafted in a particular artisan district near Kuznetsky Most in Moscow. This was a child's object, a trinket of the home front, utterly out of place on the cold streets of West Berlin. But the toy itself wasn't the main problem. The hand position was. Courier training manuals, studied rigorously by CIA counterintelligence, universally forbid holding personal items during operational movement or dead drops. Such items disrupt the balance, increase traceability, and critically, alter the natural posture, making the agent's gait and profile instantly recognizable under high-power scrutiny. A courier's hands must be free to conceal, to signal, or to rapidly access a weapon. Mikhailov's grip on the toy forced his hand and arm into an awkward, non-standard position, subtly disrupting the classic left-side concealment stance the GRU demanded. Weaver murmured, his voice tight with the sudden, seismic recognition of a massive operational flaw. No courier walks into a handoff holding his kid's toy unless something went wrong. The toy was not a decoy, it was a mistake. He zoomed the lens further, focusing on the edge of Mikhailov's sleeve, right above the cuff. The high-contrast magnification revealed a cluster of faint, microscopic smudges. They were not dirt or oil. They were tiny, brilliant flecks of paint, red and yellow, consistent with the toy itself. The deduction was instant and devastating. The paint flecks implied close, recent contact. This small, forgotten toy had not been intentionally packed. It had been grabbed or carried in haste, transferring a permanent chemical signature of Mikhailov's domestic life onto his operational attire. The courier had failed to perform the most elementary step of tradecraft, completely separating his personal world from the state's clandestine mission. The insignificant toy had suddenly become the single most significant piece of intelligence. The evidence, the single grainy photograph of the courier holding the child's toy, was presented to the joint CIA-BND task force. Initial skepticism dominated the small, smoke-filled conference room. One analyst dismissed the object outright. "It's irrelevant. Maybe he forgot to drop his kid at the mission school this morning. Couriers are still human." Another suggested the toy was a decoy object, intentionally carried to appear non-operational. Weaver countered with cold, verifiable proof. He began with pattern analysis. He displayed comparison frames. In the previous 57 surveillance logs of Mikhailov's movements over 3 months, the man never once carried a briefcase, a bag, or any personal item other than the clothes on his back. The pattern of absolute operational sterility was now broken. Next, Weaver presented forensic evidence. He overlaid the image with a forensic toy catalogue print. The toy's specific design was confirmed as unique to a small, state-sanctioned artisan workshop near Kuznetsky Most, deep inside Moscow, linking the courier's life to a specific, identifiable geographic origin. Finally, the geometry. Weaver superimposed the photograph onto a courier posture template. The wooden doll, held low in the left hand, subtly shifted Mikhailov's center of gravity and arm position by approximately 4 degrees. This deviation, however small, provided physical confirmation that the object was unintended, violating the discipline necessary for smooth concealment. The key insight was then delivered. The error was not a momentary lapse of memory. The paint flecks and the awkward posture suggested Mikhailov left home in a hurry and didn't intend to perform the dead drop at that moment. The single, simple mistake meant the GRU's plan had been compromised, forcing Mikhailov to respond to a sudden operational signal and rush out the door. The tiny toy, therefore, was not merely an object of affection, it was a physical key revealing the sudden, abrupt nature of the GRU's current deployment. The theory that the toy indicated an abrupt shift in the GRU's operation had to be proven with cold, scientific certainty. This verification process became a tight, multi-agency collaboration focused on confirming Mikhailov's moment of haste. First, BND officers re-established a tail on Mikhailov's daughter Katya, focusing on her school route and her domestic routine. They examined prior, archived surveillance of their home life, footage often considered irrelevant before the discovery of frame 44. In that archived footage, the exact wooden doll was frequently visible in the yard and inside the apartment, confirming it was Katya's constant companion, not a decoy object. Next, CIA photo analysts performed a complex forensic assessment of the original image. They used the precise angle of the shadows cast by the diplomatic sedan and Mikhailov to estimate the time of day with extreme accuracy. More critically, they used sun-angle shadow analysis combined with the visibility of the toy's fresh oil smears to estimate how long the object had been held that morning. The conclusion was undeniable. The object had not been in his hand for hours, but for a short duration, a fresh grab. The key realization solidified. The object was not chosen for the mission. It was grabbed while rushing, confirming Mikhailov left the apartment unexpectedly and without the customary moment of sterile preparation required of a courier. This verification of haste allowed analysts to pinpoint the exact window of operational compromise. Teams immediately pulled building logs and surveillance recordings for the entire GRU residential block in East Berlin, focusing on the narrow 20-minute window surrounding Mikhailov's frantic exit. The search paid off. At the exact time the sun-angle analysis indicated Mikhailov must have left his apartment, another known GRU officer, one specializing in communications, was recorded leaving the neighboring building. Their exits correlated precisely, implying not only a coordination but an abrupt courier shift, likely triggered by a sudden, external signal, forcing Mikhailov to rush out without checking his hands. The toy, confirmed to be a marker of unexpected departure, now provided the geometric proof that the GRU network itself was under pressure and had been forced to change its schedule. The insignificant piece of wood had exposed a dynamic, operational flaw. With the technical theory confirmed that the toy represented a rush and an operational flaw, the Western agencies moved to pressure test the network. The intelligence had to be confirmed from a human source and leveraged to expose the GRU's weakness. West German intelligence quietly initiated a series of interviews with a specific group of recent Soviet refugees, artisans and craftspeople with knowledge of the Kuznetsky Most district in Moscow. The goal was to tie the toy's unique design not just to a district, but to the GRU residential blocks within that district. In a temporary holding center, a woman, thin and nervous, was shown the high-contrast photo of the Matryoshka nesting doll. She stared at the graininess of frame 44, focusing on the painted surface. She recognized the unique application technique immediately. She spoke softly, with a profound sense of sadness. That toy. It comes from a workshop near the GRU residential blocks. The emotional hammer fell in Moscow, entirely outside the Western agency's direct control. This was the moment of complete, internal fracture. As is standard protocol in high-stakes counterintelligence, Soviet state security, KGB, began reviewing the leaked Western counterintelligence briefings. These documents, often intentionally leaked by the CIA BND to signal awareness, included a slightly redacted version of the surveillance photograph. The Soviets were trying to gauge what the West knew and who they were watching. The photograph, even degraded, was circulated through a routine internal intelligence channel. It eventually landed in the hands of an operative with ties to the residential block where Mikhailov lived. In the midst of this internal review, Mikhailov's 7-year-old daughter Katya was at her primary school in the GRU compound. The school was a hyper-controlled environment, its faculty mandated to report anything unusual. Katya, like any proud child, was talking about her father. She saw the slightly blurred, poorly reproduced image of the man holding the wooden doll, an image that had briefly been seen or discussed within the secure facility. The photograph was her father, and the toy was hers. In an innocent moment of connection between her two worlds, she told her teacher, "That's Papa. That's my toy he always keeps in his coat." The teacher, a routine state security informant, did not hesitate. The comment was filed immediately. That single innocent sentence provided the absolute, irrefutable internal confirmation the Soviet authorities needed. The external evidence, the Western photo, was now married to the internal reality, the child's confirmation. The most meticulous courier in the GRU had been exposed not by a bomb or a bullet, but by the love and memory of his child. Within 48 hours, Soviet authorities arrested Viktor Mikhailov. The charge was not treason, but the operational equivalent, suspicion of unauthorized contact and gross operational sloppiness. His daughter unknowingly provided the final, heartbreaking piece of evidence that destroyed him and unraveled his entire life. Mikhailov's arrest was not an isolated win. It was the unraveling of an entire logistical infrastructure. Once in Soviet custody, the meticulous courier's discipline broke, and his confession, extracted under extreme pressure, provided the GRU's adversaries with a complete blueprint of the supply line. The confession immediately exposed critical, high-value components of the GRU's Berlin operation: 3 active dead drop sites, precise coordinates, operational timing, and access methods for 3 key exchange points were revealed. The forged document channel, the specific procurement line for fake papers and travel passes, was identified and compromised. A maintenance worker courier. The identity of a secondary, seemingly innocuous maintenance worker who acted as a tertiary delivery agent was exposed. The cash channel, a GRU cash channel routed through East German smugglers used to fund all local operations, was pinpointed and shut down. Western agencies, the CIA and BND, analyzed the fallout of the arrest, concluding that the entire network collapsed not due to superior technology, but due to human error leveraged by love. The primary analytic takeaway was immediately scaled up into new doctrine. Courier sloppiness became the new predictive metric. Analysts were tasked with seeking minor personal inconsistencies, items or gestures that suggested a mind distracted by private life. Furthermore, the seemingly insignificant paint flecks on Mikhailov's coat became a new forensic identification method. The chemical composition of the red paint, unique to the artisan workshops near the GRU residential block, was catalogued. Surveillance teams began checking for similar paint traces on other suspected couriers, effectively turning the toy piece paint analysis into a metric for Moscow province residency and familial connection. The ripple effect was institutional. Surveillance teams were retrained to specifically check for parental items, a doll, a book, a child's glove, treating them as high-priority stress indicators. The presence of such items confirmed that the agent was operating under duress or in haste, making them vulnerable to immediate exploitation. The GRU had mistakenly assumed the courier was the weakest link. The CIA correctly deduced that the courier's family was the weakest link, and the toy was the visible sign of that stress. The strategic impact of a single surveillance photograph containing an irrelevant child's toy was immediate and overwhelming. The GRU network's reliance on absolute operational perfection had been catastrophically exposed by a moment of human imperfection. Western agencies quickly quantified the outcome. The paralysis was profound. 14-month paralysis. The exposure of Mikhailov's dead drops and cache channels forced the GRU's entire Berlin logistical network to be rewired for 14 months. This operational silence created massive windows of opportunity for Western intelligence. Prevented acquisitions. CIA analysts estimated that the disruption prevented the GRU from executing 4 to 6 covert technology acquisitions that year, including advanced microchip designs sought by Soviet military scientists. Protected assets. Most critically, the GRU's inability to move quickly on intelligence protected at least 3 NATO double agents whose cover had been under suspicion. The failure of the GRU's fallback network meant those assets remained undetected. This strategic outcome drew a definitive lesson. The GRU courier network, designed to function like a machine, collapsed the moment a single human detail escaped its boundaries. The wooden Matryoshka doll exposed an operational breach that technology never would have detected. It proved that the most devastating failures in clandestine work do not arise from missed signals or broken codes, but from the small, unguarded traces of personal life that slip into the field unnoticed. In the Cold War, the truth was rarely hidden in the codebooks, but often found in the things agents mistakenly carried into the light. The downfall of Viktor Mikhailov became the subject of numerous briefings and intelligence seminars on both sides of the Iron Curtain, creating an enduring popular myth about the sophistication of the Western intelligence apparatus. The myth stated that Cold War couriers were exposed by advanced technology, by satellites, by the interception of radio signals, or by sophisticated wiretaps that finally broke their code. This narrative placed the victory squarely on the shoulders of machines. The operational correction is far more simple and far more profound. Most exposures came not from technological superiority, but from human error and the simple physical artifacts of daily life. Mikhailov was not brought down by a signal interceptor. He was brought down by a single accidental prop, a child's wooden toy that was, for one crucial moment, more revealing than any wiretap or satellite image of the time. The toy spoke volumes about his emotional state, his schedule, and his relationship with his family, all of which were supposed to be invisible to the state. The core vulnerability was not in the GRU's communication codes, but in the courier's human compulsion to maintain 2 lives. His tradecraft, which was flawless when he was focused, collapsed the moment a piece of his home life intruded into his mission. The GRU taught that an agent must be a perfect, empty vessel. The Mikhailov incident taught Western intelligence that tradecraft collapses not when an agent fails to execute a command, but when a human moment breaks pattern. The presence of that toy on frame 44 was an emotional tremor, a microscopic sign of distraction, which the analyst correctly interpreted as a massive, system-wide failure. The smallest, most insignificant object of affection became the largest piece of incriminating evidence. Viktor Mikhailov never returned to Germany. His trial and subsequent fate remain classified in the deepest recesses of the former Soviet archives. To his daughter Katya, the official state narrative was simple. Her father was urgently reassigned to a new, secret post in the Far East. She grew up believing her father was a loyal public servant, unaware that her innocent comment to her teacher sealed his fate. It was only after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when fragmented documents and whispers emerged among former agents, that she learned the terrible, devastating truth. Her love for her father, and his haste to leave her, had been the single final piece of evidence used to condemn him. The legacy of the toy that exposed the courier rests on a chilling paradox. Mikhailov was a professional who successfully mastered codes, signals, drop sites, and counter-surveillance for years. But he could never, for a single, fleeting second, escape the small physical traces of the life he loved. The story of the wooden toy became an internal cautionary tale, a lesson taught in CIA and BND training centers about the value of physical forensics and pattern analysis over pure electronics. The moral was clear. The best surveillance tool in the Cold War was not a powerful computer, but the ability to read the geometry of human attachment. Frame 44 remains, a silent, unblinking witness. The single red toy, half lit, dangling from the fingers of a man whose world was about to shatter.